Hello. Hi, hi. I saw the paint. I was very impressed. People I know seem to live in show homes. So, greeting Hiram. Greeting Kate B. Right, let's get this road on the show. Hello, and welcome to Druttercup's book club. We are still reading Five Children and It, otherwise known as Wishes, huh? Oh boy. So, last chapter, Robert wished that he'd be bigger than the baker's boy who beat him up, and ended up spending the day selling himself for views in a circus as a freak because he was 12 feet tall. Good judgment has yet to encroach on the kids, although I think the Samyad keeps trying. So, apologies for the delay last week, not well, the absence last week, but we're back now and we'll get a chapter in. So, if people are sitting comfortably, oh, good timing, Chrono, hello. I shall begin. Also, quick drink. Now, I think we could see this one coming. Chapter 11. No, I can read. Let's try that again. Chapter 9. Grown Up. Cyril had once pointed out that ordinary life is full of occasions on which a wish would be most useful. And this thought filled his mind when he happened to wake early on the morning after Robert had wished to be bigger than the baker's boy, and had been it. The day that lay between these 2 days had been occupied entirely by getting the governess cart home from Bennonhurst. Cyril dressed hastily. He did not take a bath because Tim baths are so noisy, and he had no wish to rouse Robert, and he slipped off alone as Anthea had once done and ran through the dewy morning to the sandpit. He dug up the Psammead very carefully and kindly, and began the conversation by asking it whether it still felt any ill effects from the contact with the tears of Robert the day before yesterday. The Psammead was in good temper. It replied politely. "And now, what can I do for you?" it said. "I suppose you've come here so early to ask for something for yourself. Something your brothers and sisters aren't to know about, eh? Now, do be persuaded for your own good. Ask for a good fat megatherium and have done with it." "Not today. Thank you, not today, I think," said Cyril cautiously. "What I really wanted to say was, you know how you're always wishing for things when you're playing at anything?" "I seldom play," said the Psammead coldly. "Well, you know what I mean," Cyril went on impatiently. "What I want to say is, won't you just let us have our wish just when we think of it, and just where we happen to be, so that we don't have to come and disturb you again?" added the crafty Cyril. Anybody else thinking that this can only go well? So far, that's 3 of the children who have broken out in the morning and snuck down to ask the Psammead for a wish. And it could have gone better. Wonder if Jane will. There's a thought. They already don't watch their language when they're in front of the Psammead. Until these children learn to think ahead, no wish will end well. Yep. This is going to make it so much worse. Oh boy. It'll only end in your wishing for something you don't really want, as you did about the castle, said the Psammead, stretching its brown arms and yawning. It's always the same since people left off eating really wholesome things. However, have it your own way. Goodbye. Goodbye, said Syl politely. I'll tell you what, said the Psammead suddenly, shooting out its long snail's eyes. I'm getting tired of you, all of you. You have no more sense than so many oysters. Go along with you. And Cyril went. What an awful long time babies stay babies, said Cyril, after the lamb had taken his watch out of his pocket while he wasn't noticing, and with coos and clucks of naughty rapture had opened the case and used the whole thing as a garden spade, and when even immersion in the wash basin had failed to wash the mould from the works and make the watch go again. Cyril had said several things in the heat of the moment, but now he was calmer, and had even consented to carry the lamb part of the way to the woods. Those two halves of the sentence do not belong together. Cyril had been upset by the lamb and had agreed to carry him to the woods. Okay. Cyril had persuaded the others to agree to his plan and not to wish for anything more till they really did wish it. Meantime, it seemed good to go to the woods for nuts, and on the mossy grass under a sweet chestnut tree the five were sitting. The lamb was pulling up the moss by fat handfuls, and Cyril was gloomily contemplating the ruins of his watch. Go down to the woods today. Yep. It does grow, said Anthea. Doesn't you, precious? Me grow, said the lamb cheerfully. Me grow big boy, have guns and mouses and. Imagination or vocabulary gave out here. But anyway, it was the longest speech the lamb had ever made, and it charmed everyone, even Cyril, who tumbled the lamb over and rolled him in the moss to the music of delighted squeals. I suppose he'd be grown up some day, Anthea was saying, dreamily looking up at the blue of the sky that showed between the long straight chestnut leaves. But at that moment, the lamb, struggling gaily with Cyril, thrust a stout-shod little foot against his brother's chest. There was a crack. The innocent lamb had broken the glass of father's second-best Waterbury watch, which Cyril had borrowed without leave. Grow up some day, said Cyril bitterly, plumping the lamb down on the grass. I dare say he will, when nobody wants him to. I wish to goodness he would. Oh, take care, cried Anthea in an agony of apprehension. But it was too late. Like music to a song, her words and Cyril's came out together. Anthea, oh, take care. Cyril, grow up now. The faithful Psammead was true to its promise, and there, before the horrified eyes of its brothers and sisters, the lamb suddenly and violently grew up. It was the most terrible moment. The change was not so sudden as the wish changes usually were. The baby's face changed first. It grew thinner and larger. Lines came in the forehead. The eyes grew more deep-set and darker in colour. The mouth grew longer and thinner. Most terrible of all, a little dark moustache appeared on the lip of one who was still, except as to the face, a 2-year-old baby in a linen smock and white open-work socks. That does not sound comfortable, does it? Oh, I wish it wouldn't. Oh, I wish it wouldn't. You boys might wish as well. They all wished hard, for the sight was enough to dismay the most heartless. They all wished so hard indeed that they felt quite giddy and almost lost consciousness. But the wishing was quite vain, for when the wood ceased to whirl around, their dazed eyes were riveted at once by the spectacle of a very proper-looking young man in flannels and a straw hat. A young man who wore the same little black moustache which just before they had actually seen growing upon the baby's lip. This, then, was the lamb, grown up. Their own lamb. It was a terrible moment. The grown-up lamb moved gracefully across the moss and settled himself against the trunk of the sweet chestnut. He tilted the straw hat over his eyes. He was evidently weary. He was going to sleep. The lamb, the original little tiresome beloved lamb, often went to sleep at odd times and in unexpected places. Was this new lamb in the grey flannel suit and the pale green necktie like the other lamb? Had his mind grown up together with his body? Yeah, Kate. Yeah, my nephew had growing pains um in his leg for years, several years. Yeah, um, I think he's partly down to the fact that now he's very, very, very tall. But yeah, growing pains are not happy. And to give the lamb eldritch madness. That was the question which the others, in a hurried council held among the yellowing brake fern a few yards from the sleeper, debated eagerly. Whichever it is, it'll be just as awful, said Anthea. If his inside senses are grown up too, he won't stand our looking after him. And if he's still a baby inside of him, then how on earth are we to get him to do anything? And they'll be getting on for dinner time in a minute. And we haven't got any nuts, said Jane. Oh, bother nuts, said Robert. But dinner's different. I didn't have half enough dinner yesterday. Can we tie him to the tree and go home to our dinner and come back afterwards? Robert, how do you manage to make everything worse? Honestly. What? Public servant announcement. Should your little brother, oh, let's be honest here, should your little sibling grow up unexpectedly in the space of 5 minutes, please don't tie them to trees. Nurse is indeed going to ask where they left the baby. A fat lot of dinner we should get if we went back without the lamb, said Cyril in scornful misery. And it'll be just the same if we go back with him in the state he is now. Yes, I know it's my doing, don't rub it in. I know I'm a beast and not fit to live. You can take that for settled and say no more about it. The question is, what are we going to do? Let's wake him up and take him into Rochester or Maidstone and get something to eat at the baker's shop, said Robert hopefully. Take him, repeated Cyril. Yes, do. It's all my fault. I don't deny it, but you'll find you've got your work cut out for you if you try to take that young man anywhere. The lamb always was spoilt, but now he's grown up, he's a demon, simply. I can see it. Look at his mouth. Well then, said Robert, let's wake him and see what he'll do. Maybe he'll take us to Maidstone and stand treat. He ought to have a lot of money in the pockets of those extra special pants. We must have dinner anyway. They drew lots with little bits of brake fern. It fell to Jane's lot to waken the grown-up lamb. She did it gently by tickling his nose with a twig of honeysuckle. He said, "Bother the flies," twice, and then opened his eyes. You reckon he's going to be hungry after the growth spurt? It seems reasonable. Hello, kiddies, he said in a languid tone. Still here? What's the giddy hour? You'll be late for your grub. I know we shall, said Robert bitterly. Then cut along home, said the grown-up lamb. What about your grub, though? Asked Jane. Oh, how far is it to the station, do you think? I've a sort of notion I'll run up to town and have some lunch at the club. Blank misery fell like a pall on the 4 others. The lamb, alone, unattended, would go to town and have lunch at a club. Perhaps he would also have tea there. Perhaps sunset would come upon him amid the dazzling luxury of clubland, and a helpless cross-sleepy baby would find itself alone amid unsympathetic waiters, and would wail miserably for panty from the depths of a club armchair. The picture moved Anthea almost to tears. "Oh, no, lamb ducky, you mustn't do that," she cried incautiously. The grown-up lamb frowned. "My dear Anthea," he said, "how often am I to tell you that my name is Hilary or Sampmuir or Devereux? Any of my baptismal names are free to my little brothers and sisters, but not Lamb, a relic of foolishness and far-off childhood." This was awful. He was their older brother now, was he? Well, of course he was, if he was grown up, since they weren't. Thus, in whispers, Anthea and Robert. But the almost daily adventures resulting from the Psammead's wishes were making the children wise beyond their years. Cite your sources. No, not according to any evidence we've had thus far. Dear Hilary, said Anthea, and the children and the others choked at the name. You know Father didn't wish you to go to London. He wouldn't like us to be left alone without you to take care of us. Hilary, yep. Perfectly valid boy's name. Just to confuse everybody. It's a unisex name, yeah. Although it is more usually for used for women now. And then, oh, deceitful thing I am, she added to herself. Look here, said Saul, if you're our older brother, why not behave as such and take us over to Maidstone and give us a jolly good blowout, and we'll go on the river afterwards? I'm infinitely obliged to you, said the lamb courteously, but I should prefer solitude. Go home to your lunch, I mean your dinner. Perhaps I may look in around tea time, or I may not be home till after you are in your beds. Yeah, Edmund Hillary, that's his surname. There's also an MP in the UK, if I recall, Hilary Benn, and that's a fella. But yes, it is an infinite use name. You can have it as a first name, a surname, and a unisex first name at that. Just to confuse everybody. Does of course mean that you could theoretically have Hillary. Although I think that actually would be illegal. I think you could go to court and have that changed. You just never thought of that as the lamb's given name. Yeah. None of the kids call each other by their given, for the most part. So Cyril, Squirrel, that kind of thing. They obviously like their animal-based names. Uh-huh. Their beds. Speaking glances flashed between the wretched four. Much bed there would be for them if they went home without the lamb. We promised Mother not to lose sight of you if we took you out, Jane said before the others could stop her. Look here, Jane, said the grown-up lamb, putting his hands in his pockets and looking down at her. Little girls should be seen and not heard. You kids must learn not to make yourselves a nuisance. Run along home now, and perhaps if you're good I'll give you each a penny tomorrow. Look here, said Cyril, in the best man-to-man tone at his command. Where are you going, old man? You might let Bobs and me come with you, even if you don't want the girls. Yep. Hilary, very much a product of his environment. This was really rather noble of Cyril, for he never did care much about being seen in public with the lamb, who of course after sunset would be a baby again. The man-to-man tone succeeded. I shall run over to Maidstone on my bike, said the new lamb airily, fingering the little black moustache. I can lunch at the Crown, and perhaps I'll have a pull on the river. But I can't take you all on the machine, can I? Now run away along home like good children. The position was desperate. Robert exchanged a despairing look with Cyril. Anthea detached a pin from her waistband, a pin whose withdrawal left a gaping chasm between skirt and bodice, and handed it furtively to Robert with the grimace of the darkest and deepest meaning. Robert slipped away to the road. There, sure enough, stood a bicycle, a beautiful new one. Of course, Robert understood at once that if the lamb was grown up, he must have a bicycle. Oh, I'm very glad I have chat turned off. Yeah, era appropriate attitude, unfortunately. This had always been one of Robert's own reasons for wishing to be a grown-up. He hastily began to use the pin. 11 punctures in the back tyre, 7 in the front. He would have made the total 22, but for the rustling of the yellow hazel leaves which warned him of the approach of the others. He hastily leaned a hand on each wheel, and was rewarded by the whish of what was left of the air escaping from 18 neat pinholes. Your bike's run down, said Robert, wondering how he could so soon have learned to deceive. So it is, said Cyril. It's a puncture, said Anthea, stooping down and standing up again with a thorn which she'd got ready for the purpose. Look here. The grown-up lamb, or Hilary, as I suppose one must now call him, fixed his pump and blew up the tyre. The punctured state of it was soon evident. I suppose there's a cottage somewhere near where one could get a pail of water, said the lamb. There was, and when the number of punctures had been manifest, it was felt to be a special blessing that the cottage provided teas for cyclists. It provided an odd sort of tea and hammy meal for the lamb and his brothers. This was paid for out of the 15 shillings which had been earned by Robert when he was a giant, for the lamb, it appeared, had unfortunately no money about him. This was a great disappointment for the others, but it is a thing that will happen even to the most grown-up of us. However, Robert had enough to eat, and that was something. Quietly but persistently, the miserable four took it in turns to try and persuade the lamb, or Sam Muir, Sam Mao, I think, to spend the rest of the day in the woods. There was not very much of the day left by the time he had mended the 18th puncture. He looked up for the completed work with a sigh of relief and suddenly put his tie straight. There's a lady coming, he said briskly. For goodness sake, get out of the way. Go home, hide, vanish somehow. I can't be seen with a pack of dirty kids. His brothers and sisters were indeed rather dirty, because earlier in the day the lamb in his infant state had sprinkled a good deal of garden soil over them. The grown-up lamb's voice was so tyrant-like, as Jane said afterwards, that they actually retreated to the back garden and left him with his little moustache and his flannel suit to meet alone the young lady who now came up the front garden wielding a bicycle. The woman of the house came out, and the young lady spoke to her. The lamb raised his hat as she passed him, and the children could not hear what she said, though they were craning round the corner and listening with all their ears. They felt it to be perfectly fair, as Robert said, with that wretched lamb in that condition. When the lamb spoke, in a languid voice heavy with politeness, they heard well enough. "A puncture," he was saying. "Can I not be of assistance, if you would allow me?" There was a stifled explosion of laughter, and the grown-up lamb, otherwise Devereux, turned the tail of an angry eye in its direction. "You're very kind," said the lady, looking at the lamb. "You look rather shy, but as the boys put it, there didn't seem to be any nonsense about her." "But, oh," whispered Cyril, "I should have thought he'd had enough bicycle mending for one day. And if she only knew that really and truly he's only a whiny, piney, silly little baby." Oh, that hits hard these days. "He's not," Anthea murmured angrily. "He's a dear, if people only let him alone. It's our own precious lamb still, whatever silly idiots may turn him into, isn't he, Pussy?" Jane doubtfully supposed so. Now the lamb, whom I must try to remember to call Sam Mauer, was examining the lady's bicycle and talking to her with a very grown-up manner indeed. No one could possibly have supposed, to see and hear him, that only that very morning he had been a chubby child of 2 years, breaking other people's Waterbury watches. Oh, is it Sammore? I wasn't sure about the second pronunciation. Okay. It becomes Seymour. Okay, thank you for that, Chrono. I apologise for the mangled pronunciations to this point. Hilary Seymour Devereux. Wow. They just took a run up with those names, didn't they? You just looked it up because you were unfamiliar with his name. Oh, yep. Yeah, I was going with a place. Devereux, as he ought to be called for the future, took out a gold watch when he had mended the lady's bicycle, and all the hidden onlookers said, "Oh," because it seemed so unfair that the baby, who had only that morning destroyed 2 cheap but honest watches, should now, in the grown-upness to which Cyril's folly had raised him, have a real gold watch with a chain and seals. Hilary, as I will now term him, withered his brothers and sisters with a glance, and then said to the lady, with whom he seemed to be quite friendly. You guess he named him from a bunch of relatives. It's possible, yes. Could well be family names. Or they maybe just like the sound of them. But yeah, porting in family names is quite common. I think we now know why lamb is lamb. If you will allow me, I'll ride with you as far as the crossroads. It's getting late and there are tramps about. No one will ever know what answer the young lady intended to give to this gallant offer, for directly Anthea heard it made, she rushed out, knocking aside the swill pail, which overflowed in a turbid stream, and caught the lamb, suppose I ought to say Hilary, by the arm. The others followed, and in an instant the 4 dirty children were visible beyond disguise. Don't let him, said Anthea to the lady, and she spoke with intense earnestness. He's not fit to go with anyone. Seymour and Devereux both suggest the family have French or probably Norman heritage. Yeah, that's quite common. Entirely possible, Chrono. We know that they really don't speak French from the Phoenix on the Carpet, however. So it is in history, if so. But yeah, it's not like Norman ancestry is uncommon in the UK. Go away, little girl, said Seymour, as we will now call him, in a terrible voice. There's no need to judge. Go home at once. You much better not have anything to do with him, the now reckless Anthea went on. He doesn't know who he is. He's something very different from what you think he is. What do you mean? Asked the lady, not unnaturally, while Devereux, as I must term the grown-up lamb, tried vainly to push Anthea away. The others backed her up, and she stood solid as a rock. You just let him go with you, said Anthea, and you'll soon see what I mean. How would you like to suddenly see a poor helpless little baby spinning along downhill beside you with its feet up on a bicycle it had lost control of? The lady had turned rather pale. Who are these very dirty children? She asked the grown-up lamb, sometimes called Seymour in these pages. I don't know, he lied miserably. Oh, lamb, how can you? Cried Jane, when you know perfectly well you're our own little baby brother we're so fond of. We're his big brothers and sisters, she explained. Turning to the lady, who with trembling hands was now turning her bicycle towards the gate. And we've got to take care of him. And we must get him home before sunset, or I don't know whatever will become of us. You see, he's under a sort of spell, enchanted, you know what I mean. Again and again the lamb, Devereux, I mean, had tried to stop Jane's eloquence, but Robert and Cyril held him, one by each leg, and no proper explanation was possible. The lady rode hastily away and electrified her relatives at dinner by telling them of her escape from a family of dangerous lunatics. The little girl's eyes were simply those of a maniac. I can't think how she came to be at large, she said. When her bicycle had whizzed away down the road, Cyril spoke gravely. Hilary, old chap, he said, you must have had sunstroke or something, and the things you've been saying to that lady. Why, if we were to tell you the things you've said when you were yourself again, say tomorrow morning, you would never understand them, let alone believe them. You trust to me, old chap, and come home now, and if you're not yourself in the morning, we'll ask the milkman to ask the doctor to come. The poor grown-up lamb, Seymour was really one of his Christian names, seemed now too bewildered to resist. Well, since you all seem to be as mad as the whole worshipful company of hatters, he said bitterly, I suppose I had better take you home. But you're not to suppose I shall pass this over. I shall have something to say to you all tomorrow morning. Yes, you will, my lamb, said Anthea under her breath. It won't be at all the sort of thing you think it's going to be. In her heart she could hear the pretty, soft little loving voice of the baby lamb, so different from the affected tones of the dreadful grown-up lamb, one of whose names was Devereux, saying, Me love Panty wants to come to own Panty. Oh, let's go home for goodness sake, she said. You shall say whatever you like in the morning, if you can, she said in the whisper. It was a gloomy party that went home through the soft evening. During Anthea's remarks, Robert had again made play with the pin and the bicycle tire, and the lamb, who they had to call Seymour or Devereux or Hilary, seemed really at last to have had his fill of bicycle mending. so the machine was wheeled. The sun was just on the point of setting when they arrived at the White House. The four elder children would have liked to linger in the lane till the complete sunsetting turned the grown-up lamb, whose Christian names I will not further weary you by repeating, into their own dear tiresome baby brother. But he in his grown-upness insisted on going on, and thus he was met in the front garden by Martha. Now, you will remember that, as a special favour, the Psammead had arranged that the servants of the house should never notice any change brought about by the wishes of the children. Therefore, Martha merely saw the usual party, with the baby lamb, about whom she had been desperately anxious all the afternoon, trotting beside Anthea on fat baby legs, while the children, of course, still saw the grown-up lamb, never mind what names he was christened by, and Martha rushed at him and caught him in her arms, exclaiming, "Come to his own Martha, then, precious Poppet!" The grown-up lamb, whose names shall now be buried in oblivion, struggled furiously. An expression of intense horror and annoyance was seen on his face. But Martha was stronger than he. She lifted him up and carried him into the house. None of the children will ever forget that picture. The neat grey flannel-suited grown-up young man with the green necktie and a little black moustache, fortunately he was slightly built and not tall, struggling in the sturdy arms of Martha, who bore him away helpless, imploring him as she went to be a good boy now and come and have his nice premick. Fortunately, the sun set as they reached the doorstep. The bicycle disappeared, and Martha was seen to carry into the house the real, live, darling, sleepy 2-year-old lamb. The grown-up lamb, nameless henceforth, was gone forever. Nesbit is absolutely loving the fourth wall breaks in this one, the whole way through the book, but especially this chapter. It's really, really going for it on the names. Forever, said Cyril, because as soon as ever the lamb's old enough to be bullied, we must jolly well begin to bully him for his own sake, so he mustn't grow up like that. You shan't bully him, said Anthea stoutly, not if I can stop it. We must tame him by kindness, said Jane. You see, said Robert, if he grows up in the usual way, there'll be plenty of time to correct him as he goes along. That awful thing today was his growing up so suddenly. There was no time to improve him at all. Doesn't want any improving, said Anthea, as the voice of the lamb came cooing through the open door, just as she had heard it in her heart that afternoon. Me loves Panty, want to come home, Panty. End of chapter. Oh boy. Okay, that's a content warning for next time. When unconstrained wishes meet Cyril, who's been reading Last of the Mohicans. Okay. Okie dokie. I will pre-read, but to be honest, it hasn't been as bad as I was expecting, either in The Phoenix and the Carpet or this one, to be honest. I had been braced for impact to a certain extent, but actually, between the islanders in Phoenix and the Carpet and then the representation of the gypsies in this have actually not been as bad as I was expecting for the era. But, as I said, era appropriate. But yeah, that's going to be interesting. So, that'll be a fun one, which will require me to pre-read. Just so I can get some content warnings up. Yeah, in terms of sensitivity. And in fact, in terms of sort of story structure. This has actually been rattling through at a rate of knots. And is taking a remarkably hard-headed look at children and I suppose how they're not perfect little angels without making them out to be actual, criminals in waiting. It feels fairly weirdly realistic. And I do want to know why their parents keep abandoning them. I do feel sorry for them in so many ways. Their parents do just vanish. Which I know is essential for the story, but it does rather seem like they've just been left to their own devices. It's a very Darwinian way of bringing up your kids. So, next week, we'll have chapter 10 Scalps. I'm now concerned about what's going to happen to the children, but okay. So, no idea if I'm going to have any more streams this week. And I'm just absolutely underwater with some work. So unfortunately, I am not streaming with Chrono this week. Hopefully, because my deadline is this week. I will be back and we can get some projects on Void in next Wednesday, with luck and a fair wind. And I will be back to streaming on Thursday as well next week. I may even be able to squeeze in the stream on Monday. I need to check when something's coming out. Pardon me. But I am looking very closely at the Blood of Kerensky expansion for MechWarrior. So that's going to be interesting. And if I can do that, then I might see if I can drag a fish into a multi-stream. So we shall see. So, thank you very much indeed for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. Lamb grew up to be awful. That's fantastic. Excellent stuff. And I hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.